And action. Welcome to another action-packed podcast of the Action Podcast. We are here. It is Barbenheimer weekend. A lot of big things happening. And this episode, we're, of course, going to be reviewing Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan's new film. We're going to be reviewing Barbie, starring Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling. Almost forgot that for some reason. And we also are going to be able to talk about Netflix's They Cloned Tyrone, which stars John Boyega and Jamie Foxx. So with that, Pete, we're gonna go Oppenheimer first.
Smart.
So before we start, I just want to mention, so we do have the weekend numbers. We are shooting this on a Monday night, so we have the weekend numbers already. And Oppenheimer, I believe the final numbers, it was 180 million worldwide, and Oppenheimer had 82 million domestic. So this
seems a bit low.
No, not at all. This was like one of the largest box office weekends of all time. Like, there are a lot of people like me that actually saw both movies on Thursday night, and like I was not by myself in doing that. Like, it was pretty crazy on how well both films did. Both films actually outperformed their expectations, which is, again, just a great thing in general, especially with the industry being in on strike. So it just shows. And the other thing too, before again we get into the analysis and whatnot, what's also great about this is these were two non-IP movies. Like, there's been no other films of these. Like, Oppenheimer obviously is a standalone. Barbie may become an IP. I don't know what they can do, but that's a possibility. But there was nothing that preceded this, so that's kind of big, on a film front as well. These are new properties that are crushing it. So, but Pete,
right? But Barbie does have a little bit of help with the fact that it's
for sure
an actual IP that's been in existence for almost 100 years.
Sure,
and it's one of the biggest names in the world.
Sure,
so
I mean, I definitely equate
that
Super Mario Brothers, which again had not had a successful film following. Obviously, the video game's very successful, but again, just because it's successful on one realm doesn't make it successful in another. So with that, Pete, go ahead. Let's talk Oppenheimer.
Okay, so Oppenheimer. Yeah, this was my number one most anticipated movie of the year from the beginning. And I've been waiting with bated breath for this movie to come out. And boy, was I just blown away by this film. This was the best movie of the year, as far as I'm concerned, not just because it's visually stunning, well written, well acted, well everything. I mean, this is a brilliant piece of filmmaking. It's an 8.8 on IMDb, which typically that means it's an amazing film. For me, it feels really kind of low. I feel like this is a 9 easy. The cool thing about this movie is that, I mean, it's 3 hours long, but it does not feel like 3 hours. But it's also, this was a weird weekend as well, because you get two different things. You've got a movie like Oppenheimer and a movie like Barbie. One of those is a movie that you can go and experience and just have fun with it, right? This is not that film where you can just go and just have a great time. This is very dialogue heavy. It's Christopher Nolan at his absolute best. I feel like that this is his Godfather. I feel like that this is going to be remembered as his best movie. As much as I love Dark Knight, as much as I love Interstellar, I mean, this movie, I think, just exceeds those movies. I think this is one of those films that he has really tried to make his greatest film. I feel like that this is the movie he wants people to remember him by in some weird way. The score is amazing. I think the editing of this film is perfect. It's quick. There's just enough in each shot to keep the movie going forward. I think that's why it doesn't feel like the 3 hours. I think that the way this movie was edited really helps that, because there's no fat in this movie. I mean, it's clean all the way through. Just
Yeah.
I'm watching it again, and that's why my review is going to be a little bit jumbled, because I'm literally in the throes of trying to wrap my brain around this film in its entirety. There's so much in this movie. So, I mean, the cinematography alone is stunning.
Yeah.
Let's look at the acting for just a second. I mean, Cillian Murphy
Let's
is.
let me say my point real quick, and then we'll go into like specifics, because I think we can both add to that.
Go for it.
So yeah, I was I guess going into it, my biggest concern was Tenet before this, which I was also anticipating, but it just didn't fully work the way some of his other films did.
I didn't get Tenet at all. I
Yeah.
was angry when I
I
left
watched
that.
Tenet 3 times, and it still was just like, okay, it wasn't terrible by any stretch, but it didn't have that same sauciness that his other films have. Now I love The Dark Knight. I think The Dark Knight is a perfect film, because it's action, it's got deep characters, and just a tight script, the tightest script really, and then of course the music, and so, but this one, right away, like you're saying, you get into it, and you can just, it is so well directed. I don't think, I said this in my Instagram reel, but I think if anybody else directed this, because this is a tough topic too, and that's what, Christopher Nolan does so well, is, take Interstellar, for example, where there's a lot of exposition at moments that it's needed, though. Same thing with this one. You're dealing with nuclear fission and things of that nature. This is a science movie. Obviously, he's a scientist, and again, the way he combines sound and visuals, and again, editing, amazing editing job. It really elevates this film to be. I'm saying tolerable, but I don't mean tolerable. Obviously, I mean it at a higher level. But again, the subject matter is so tough. There's a reason why no one's really tackled the subject matter, because it's really difficult to make this absolutely interesting.
Well,
And
that's why it's 3 hours. I mean, you can't talk about the Los Alamos project without talking about all the other stuff if you're doing
yeah,
a biopic. See, I thought that there was going to be a lot of I thought it was going to be kind of a weird Christopher Nolan type story, right? The way, that Interstellar was just kind of like all over the place, it felt, but
yeah,
it was beautiful. I love that film. I love it. But this is a straight biopic. Now there are jumps, right, between past and present, and whatever's happening now.
yeah,
It does jump around a lot, but it's done seamlessly. Like,
yeah,
when you are in different periods of the story, but you are in that time period. Like, I think that's one of the brilliant things about this film, is that from the start you are in that time period. Like, you don't feel like you're in 2023.
sure,
You really do feel like you're inside of this world.
yeah.
um Anyways, go on. This is so good.
Yeah,
So,
I definitely think it's good. I don't know if I'm willing. I don't know if I'm ready to call it the number one movie of the year. I definitely think it's in competition. I probably need to watch it again, because I've seen Air so many times. They're two different films too, so it's really hard to compare the two, because they're really, really just different. Um,
yeah,
but
but Air is just the telling of a specific story.
no,
This is
sure,
a story wrapped in a story wrapped in a story, and
no,
it is
absolutely, no, absolutely. And again, I'm like, I was looking at the ones I've favored a lot. Covenant. This film I would put up there. Um, I mean,
Reckoning is amazing.
I was gonna say,
I
even Mission Impossible.
even
These are all different movies, though, and so I do think, again, I think this is where a lot of people are just wrong sometimes in their critiques. They don't understand that, movies are not apples to apples. And so, it's really, they're different flavors of like ice cream. And so I think for some, Mission Impossible will be the best film of the year. I think for a lot of people, Oppenheimer will be the best movie of the year. Air is still going to be competing for that spot. And again, like, I just watched The Covenant not that long ago again, and it's like I can watch that anytime. So I'm not ready to give. I need to watch it. I want to watch it again for sure. But it is very, very, very amazing and great. And I'm looking forward to watching it again. And again, I think this is probably a second best film. I'm not willing to say it's better than Dark Knight, but I can see why you would say that.
Yeah, it's just, it doesn't rely on it doesn't need any action. It really is the telling of his story. And that's why I think that but through his lens, right? I mean, I think this is why the two standout performances in this one, if they don't win Oscars this year, I mean, I don't really know what we're doing. I mean, Murphy is as Oppenheimer is just, he's next level. Like, I've always loved him in like Peaky Blinders, and he's incredible in that. He's always good. And but this is finally like his moment to shine and prove how amazing he is. His eyes are magnetizing. Like, when in each scene, which is every scene virtually, like, you're just captivated because he just tells you everything. And speaking of being able to read somebody and to feel everything that somebody is doing, Robert Downey Jr.'s everything that he does in this film is brilliant. I think supporting actor is in his future as well. I think those two performances, amongst so many, I can go through the list. I think we should, but I think that those two performances are absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I think we, going back to Robert Downey Jr., that was the one thing that really stood out to me right away. Was at first I didn't recognize him because
he's got Iron Man money. He doesn't have to do this film and crush the way he just did.
But obviously he's wearing makeup and stuff like that, so they aged him. So he doesn't. And I'm like, that guy kind of looks like Robert Downey Jr. And I knew he was involved in the film, but I didn't know who he was yet. Really, I didn't. Again, I did try not to do too much research ahead of time so I can just watch the film. And I'm looking at, and again, his performance right away was already like, I was like, wow. And then once I was like, no, that is Robert Downey Jr. I was just like, wow, this is just an incredible performance. Like, he was so good. And
I didn't think, based on the trailers that I saw, that he was actually as significant a role as he turned out to be.
No, for sure.
He was really good. I mean, Emily Blunt is good. She's always good. Matt Damon, I thought, was really good.
Yeah.
I think the surprise of this movie was Josh Hartnett. I thought
yes.
I didn't even recognize him at first, and then I'm like, that's Josh Hartnett. I thought he did an amazing job.
This I thought was his best acting job. Like, I legit saw just tremendous growth in his acting style, and I hope that he's kind of back on the radar again for movies. I don't know why he stepped away. I can probably do some research on that, but I even have him in my notes. He was just so good, and I'm like, dude, where's this guy been? Like, he could have been doing a lot more films, because last time I remember him, I know he probably did something else, but was Pearl Harbor. Really, I don't really remember him in anything else.
And I know that he's done other things, but yeah, I mean, that was the last one of any sort of significance. But I mean, the actors in this film want to just come in for a shot or maybe two shots, and they're totally fine with that. Gary Oldman plays President Truman. He comes in for like a scene. Just crushes for like a scene. Rami Malek comes in for like, I think he's in two scenes. The first scene he does, he's kind of like whatever. Then he comes in at the end and he's just like, whoa, my God. Casey Affleck.
I have Casey Affleck in my notes.
He's just another person who comes in for like a scene and just comes in and just crushes. Florence Pugh has several scenes and she's really, really good as well. Man. But the great thing about this film, and I think one of the difficulties of this film is being able to for Nolan and the other writers to balance the legacy. Is he a hero? Is he a villain? And throughout the entire film, there really is this sort of battle, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when it ends, you're just like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. I
this is
mean
that's
the
the movie
ending
I've
is really
seen in a
good.
while.
I have a quote from here that I think kind of really sums up the film, but it's possible they didn't talk to you at all. They talked about something important. And that's obviously towards the end, but the significance of that is, you know, even in like, especially in like today's politics, it's like everybody wants to think that everything's about themselves, and it's like, yeah, they weren't even thinking about you, brother. Like, don't even worry about it. And
Yeah.
I don't know, that line really stood out to me while I was watching that film, because again, it's just like I think that sums up with the mission of this film is also super important, and a lot of people want to debate. We were even talking about this earlier, but a lot of people want to debate, whether he should have created or not. And they're talking about the bomb itself, but what they're taking out is like how much of a race this was to not get in Hitler's hands. Because if Hitler and Germany created this first, like we live in a different world today. You know what I mean? Like, one of the jokes always is like, with Britain, like you'd be speaking German if it wasn't for us, right? Like that would be 100% true. We may all be speaking Germany. It's that one movie, right? Or that one TV series. I forget. It's on Amazon, but it's about if the Germans won, and that's really the significance of
Oh, the
this.
Man from High Castle.
Man from High Castle, yeah, yeah. But
Yeah,
that's
never
really the
saw.
significance of this movie and this storyline in general is the race against time and evil, and it's not about whether or not we should have done this or not. We had to do it first before Hitler or even the Soviet Union um, discovered it or created it.
Well, yeah, and going back to the Murphy's performance in here, I mean, that is the question, right? Like how what does it do to somebody like Oppenheimer who went into this project with the intention of helping the world, basically,
Yeah.
and ultimately ends up contributing to its potential demise, right? Or potential destruction, ultimately. Like,
Right.
and the way he played and the arc that he goes through and this journey that you watch is just an amazing performance. Um, and you don't really answer that question, but you feel it. You feel and you see what it does to that person, what it did to Oppenheimer, and his performance was just incredible. The one other thing I'll say about it, and then we can move forward, is that when films use black and white and they go into black and white, sometimes they just rely on that by itself just to be something different in their movie, to do something. I felt every time it went into black and white, it wasn't just about going into the past. Even the way it was,
It actually was the future, wasn't it?
uh, ah,
Black and white
yeah,
was the
no,
future,
it
or the
was, you're
present,
right.
or the president, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. But Nolan's shots are so gorgeous in
Yeah.
these black and white shots that it really does, again, from what we said at the very beginning, it does take you into that time period, and it takes you into this world, without distraction. It just enhanced, not for the sake of enhancement, if that makes any sort of sense. Like, there's something different about the way Nolan used the black and white portions of this film versus a lot of black and white portions that I've seen in other films, that like there wasn't a reliance on the black and white just for sake of being in black and white. I mean, there was some
Yeah.
real purpose behind it, and it was just
Well,
gorgeous. I mean, I can go on and on about this film.
my initial take is, and this isn't like, again, I haven't done a bunch of research on it, but my initial take on the cinematography and the black and white specifically is it felt like you're in the courtroom with, and you're looking at the photos of that event, right? Um, because that's when a lot of the black and white was used, was in the courtroom or in the interrogation stuff, and it just felt like
Yeah,
you're in
with
those,
Einstein.
yeah, yeah, in those scenes and stuff like that. So I thought it was really well affected.
Yeah, and I think the other reason why I really love this movie, I know I said I'll let it go, but now I got to keep going. The other reason why I just really love this film, because I always love when the most brilliant person in a film, other people who are very smart and powerful as well, they always think that they have the upper hand.
Yeah,
And I always love a movie where the really super smart guy, you know, says "F you," basically.
yeah,
I love that kind of movie where,
yeah,
you know,
sure.
we got him. No, you don't. You don't got him. He's because he's that much smarter than you, you
Yeah.
know. And I just love those kinds of films. This is a great film. Go see it immediately. If you weren't part of the other billion people who saw it this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like both of us, I guess we'll say, wherever you want to rank it, but it's definitely one of the top 5 movies of the year. And you're definitely got a legitimate Oscar contender this year in multiple categories. So with that, Pete, let's move to our next film, which is Barbie, who, fun fact, Pete used to work for. And Pete was, I don't know if you're allowed to say this, but you were actually around when they originally were throwing the
Well,
idea.
yeah. Towards the end of my tenure there at Mattel, like this was just starting as an idea of doing a film, a live action film. You know, the question at the time was who were we going to get to be in this film. And I'm not going to divulge any of that. I don't think it's appropriate. But there were some really interesting names being tossed around. And then I remember years later when they announced that it was going to be Margot Robbie, you were just like, duh, that makes sense. That seems the obvious choice. Why don't you go first on this one? I'm kind of curious your thoughts because I have thoughts.
Yeah, well, this is directed by Greta Gerwig. I believe she did Little Women and another,
Crush.
yeah.
She
Um,
crushed.
but this movie, like this movie's super risky because, like you're saying, tonality. And I will talk about this because it's part of my point. But there was an original film, and I know like Amy Schumer was involved, and I think she wrote it, and it just didn't work. And I think all the parties, to my knowledge, just thought it didn't work. And so obviously everybody moved on, and that's how this iteration came on. But I think I think that's why this movie did work. One is the tone, like I just mentioned, and the allowing this film to be very self-aware and funny. It's adult humor, but still like kids can watch it. That was key. Obviously, the casting, I do think, crushed it. I love that. Like, if Disney made this movie, I think this movie would have sucked because Disney would just be lost in trying to make people happy versus making a great film. And I think this movie makes like Mattel makes fun of themselves in a way a lot. Um, I loved how it had diversity, but again, they were poking fun of it at the same time. And so it just incorporates a lot of like the you know the elements that Barbie's gone through over the years. Will Ferrell, of course, is maybe you really want to elevate your film. It's just a great role for him as a supporting guy. Like this felt like older Will Ferrell when he would have like a smaller role, you know, and would really just crush it. You know what I mean? Like I thought this was a really good role for him. They let him be him. They didn't try and control him a lot. Um, yeah,
You know,
I
just real fast, but you know, Mattel is a tricky company. How can I word this? Um, the fact that they were able to make a movie like this and greenlight a movie like this with this story, this script, the way it was presented, the fact that they said, okay, we'll allow a film like this to be made, um, tells me a lot about them in a positive way, because I never thought that I would see the day that they would allow themselves to be sort of ridiculed in a way, because it isn't like we're ridiculing you for the sake of being mean, or we think that you're awful people. It is very like playful, right? So
Yeah.
I think that that's why it was greenlit, and I'm glad that they did. I think that that was sort of the essence of is this movie going to be successful or not? Like, if
Yeah.
they were going to take that step, that leap, and say, look, forget it, let's just make fun of ourselves, and
Yeah.
let's just be that kind of company. Thank God they did, because I think the Mattel of 15 years ago would never have done that
Yeah, for sure.
at all.
Like I'm reminded
I'm
of,
glad that they did. This is a positive thing.
yeah, for sure. It reminds me of like Fox and Family Guy. Like Family Guy always has like those little Fox network kind of jokes where it's
Yeah.
like, stay tuned for three guys standing close to each other and rotating. You know what I mean? Like, and Fox would always do that. And so again, having the self-awareness to joke about some of your mistakes. Oh, these are all the shows that Fox canceled instead of us. They just went in 10 minutes of shows that are canceled. And again, like, that's good humor is self-deprecation.
Yeah.
And I think this is where Disney, I think,
It
needs
can
to
go too
improve.
far, right? Self-deprecation can go too far. I mean, I think this was the
Yeah.
perfect balance of because they didn't use it as like a crutch, right? It was a little added piece of loveliness to it. I mean, the real stars of this movie, let's get that right. It's that Barbie and Ken, right? Like, that's the
Sure.
story. It's their sort of thing. And of course, Barbie's going to go off and figure something out. But I mean, really, that's the fun part of this film, and
Yeah.
that's the great part, is seeing those two. Margot Robbie, who's so perfect as Barbie, who does an amazing job as Barbie,
Yeah.
but Ryan Gosling as Ken is probably the funniest thing I've seen in quite some time.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and using him as maybe I'm doing this whole man thing wrong, and I've got to like change my ways of doing things. I mean, that was hilarious. That was a great twist. Um, I think the lessons that not just girls and women can learn from this film, I think, are strong. I
Yeah.
think that this movie was really well thought out. I think it was directed beautifully. Greta
Yeah.
Gerwig did what an amazing job.
Yeah.
Uh, um,
The number
but
one
also,
movie, the number one movie all time for a female director. So I would definitely
yeah.
want to shout that out. Like, that's an awesome achievement.
But then also, I don't know, the people who were involved in the set design and the costumes and
Oh
stuff
yeah.
like that, just
Production.
crushed.
Yeah.
Beautiful, just a great thing. But unlike, well, do you have anything else to say? Because I've got a couple of little tiny things that I'm not too
Uh,
thrilled about.
Well, I'm gonna say one thing,
Talk about
and
the cast, maybe.
keep this in perspective of what I'm about to say. I think this movie was a perfect film for what this movie was. Meaning, me going to see a Barbie movie, I couldn't have come out more happier with what they did. Like, I could not have imagined a better case scenario for this. So, like,
Yeah,
with the script, the acting, the directing, the editing, like everything, I thought they aced everything for what this movie is. Because again, what do I have to go see Barbie for? Obviously, I've never used their toys, nothing like that. I'm not their IP. However, I can go in here and watch this movie and come out thoroughly entertained, laughed out loud, really enjoyed my 2 hours in the movie theater, and I want to see it again. Like, I, I can't imagine a better case scenario for this film. And again, I think at the end of the day, it starts with the story, right? I think the script was spot on for what this movie could have been. Again, I could have seen
yeah,
this film go in so many different directions, and it went. I love what they did with it. That worked for the characters, like the actual, Ken and Barbie. Like, I loved that dynamic, like you're saying.
yeah. It was really good. Um, yeah, I mean, they're clearly the stars. The things that, okay, in terms of casting, like Oppenheimer, in a way, it's really weird
Yeah.
that these movies came out on the same weekend, because this movie utilized some really really big names in the smallest of screen times, right? Rhea Perlman
Oh yeah.
as the original inventor of the Barbie doll, comes in
Yeah,
and
that's
is
cool.
so warm and sweet, and her performance is really, really great. John Cena is, he's just being silly, funny John Cena, but he pops in at some point. I think Kate McKinnon always does a great job.
Yeah,
Uh, I think that that willingness to take a tiny role is important sometimes,
yeah,
especially in Oppenheimer, but in this movie as well. I feel like in a way that it would have benefited Will Ferrell more if he wasn't in this movie as much as he was, to be honest. I thought that the stuff with him could have very easily been trimmed down a lot. I think if it was just like the boardroom scene and not all the other stuff afterwards, I think it would have benefited a little bit more in a
maybe,
way.
maybe.
I don't think they needed it because really, like we were saying, the focus is the Ken and the Barbie and what they're going through. It had nothing to really to do about the whole Mattel enemy, quote unquote, and the big bad Mattel company, right? I don't think they needed it. I mean, he's always funny. Like he can do stuff that's funny all the time. I think that's the only thing that I think could have been trimmed a little bit to make this the quote unquote perfect movie for this movie kind of comment that you made.
Okay.
Um, I mean, other than that, I think that they could have. Well, let's just leave it at that because I can go on and on. But I think at the end of the day, I'm gonna go see this film tomorrow. With because I'm in Italy. I'm gonna go see it with some Italians. It'll be my first Italian cinema experience, and we're all gonna go watch it together. So I'm looking
What
forward to
language is it
seeing
going to be
it
in?
again. What's that?
What language is it going to be in?
It's gonna be in English with Italian subtitles.
Okay, nice.
Oh, it's gonna be great.
Yeah, all right. All right. Well, moving on. We'll close it out with They Cloned Tyrone, which is again available now on Netflix, streaming. And I wanted to point out the director of this, Jewel Taylor. And I did a little like research before checking this out because I saw a billboard in Hollywood and I was just like, huh, I haven't heard anything about this. What's up with this? And then I looked at, Jewel Taylor because I always like to know who the director and or writer is. And I'll tell you what, man, this guy is a big time up and coming. I mean, he's already established, so I don't want to lower what this guy is, but he wrote Creed 2. Um, he also wrote the new Space Jam
Oh wow,
as well. And then the other thing he directed, where's that?
what's up with that?
Oh no, this was his first real directing. Oh, but he also wrote the Shooting Stars, which we just watched. And so
Mhm.
again, with Creed 2 and that, those are two, obviously very, very great scripts.
Yeah,
I
those
was
are great.
surprised on how good Shooting Stars was. Blew my expectations, especially for just like a Peacock original, like only. They don't have that reputation yet. And so again, really, really surprised. So this guy, and I heard good things about this movie coming into it. So I was like, with this guy attached, Jamie Foxx, I'm like, John Boyega, of course. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's
I
worth a
was,
view.
yeah, I was looking forward to this. And I'll tell you what, man, this didn't disappoint. Like it's got a kind of a different tone, but it's you laugh a lot. And I loved kind of like the dialogue style, like between the character Yo-Yo and Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx is pretty hilarious in this one. He plays a pimp. This movie's it's a weird genre film. This is not, but what I love about this film is it's super original. And I think this movie balances like social commentary with comedy and just a good storyline. And so it makes it very easy to ingest. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because this is again a movie that can go terribly wrong in the wrong hands. But
It's in my queue.
but I think again when you add again comedy, they always say is the best way to if you want to talk about serious subjects, use comedy because it lowers people's defenses. And so I again I loved how this movie came together. It was really interesting at first because you're just like, okay, what's happening here? And then again, how it unfolded. There's a couple great scenes in it when they get information, but it was super entertaining. And again, definitely for a streaming film, like you got to check this out. It's definitely worth your time. And acting performances like John Boyega, man, you watch him in this compared to like him as Finn, and you're just like, man, this dude's got some range. Because obviously he's an English dude, but you know, he looks like he grew up from the hood in this film. You know what I mean? Like he's
Right.
no sign of an accent at all. You know, it's got the look and this the characterization. Really, really good acting. Again, Jamie Foxx absolutely crushes this. This is one of I'll put this up there for Jamie Foxx with like his horrible bosses, motherfucker Jones role. Very kind of similar where it's like a little over the top, but in a good way. Like it's what makes it funny is because it's just an outrageous character. And the lines, like the way the character is written, it's so kind of unique. He likes to use references that are kind of obscure, and just again his flow of lines and jokes, like he's just funny. And what's up?
I said, yeah, I'll check it out. It was like, it was the movie that I saw pop up and I was like, I got to see this. Just like you were describing, like it looks very interesting, worth a viewing. I just didn't have time to get to it just because I
literally just finished it before this podcast. So it's, yeah, it worked out. But like I said, even Nicole liked it. Like it was really, really entertaining. Again, a really cool, kind of a cool concept. I mean, I've definitely heard of stories like this, but this is just well written, and again, kind of a cool concept. Very original, kind of a script, which I liked. And again, you know, Jewel Taylor, I want to give a shout out. Like, I'm interested to see what his next project is, and watch him moving forward because you know, Creed 2, all those films I mentioned, Shooting Stars, this, like he's entertaining. So definitely check it out. So with that, Pete, next week we have Haunted Mansion coming out. On our classic podcast, we just released Shawshank Redemption, so make sure you check that out. And then our next classic film we'll have is Rocky 4. Then we'll have a little bit of break while Pete's still in Italy, and we'll come back and we'll get back on the gravy train of classic films. There's a little bit more films coming out this summer. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Strays with Will Ferrell and Jamie Foxx. That looks hilarious. So there's gonna be some good films to review before we head into the fall. So
be some sleepers.
Yeah,
we'll find.
Yeah, it's been a good summer so far. So I'm hoping the streak continues. I'm looking forward to seeing what Haunted Mansion, how that's going to turn out. So hopefully it's a good. So with that, Pete, that is a cut. Thanks, guys.